91.3 FM stereo. It's 17 minutes past 12, and that means it's time for our Matric revision program. Once again, trying to get Matrics clued up for the exams. We're looking at grade 12 business studies today, and we'll be speaking in session 1 to our tutor, Imran Majid. Joins me in studio. Imran, assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the airwaves on the Voice of the Cape, and shukran so much for taking the time out to join us today.
Shukran, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And of course, Imran, just before, if you could just move a bit closer to the mic, just before we start, Imran, obviously business studies, grade 12, we're going to be doing the introductory portion. Can you tell us just a little bit about what you will be covering in paper 1 in the session?
So basically in paper 1, we have two sections. Business studies is broken down into two papers, paper 1 and paper 2. Today we'll focus on paper 1. Which is basically broken down into two subtopics, which is business environments and business operations.
Okay, fantastic. And you're welcome to check it out on Facebook. We are sharing the link there as well as YouTube. The video will stay up there for the foreseeable future. So if you've missed the session, or if someone else has told you about it a little bit too late, you can go onto YouTube and Facebook and you'll be able to see the visuals. We'll be sharing that with you, and of course sharing the slides pertaining to today's discussion. And also please do comment on the Facebook and comment on the YouTube as well. So I think without further delay, Imran, I think it's time for us to head into today's lesson, and yeah, we leave it up to you.
No problem. So basically today what we're going to do, we're going to go over the business studies paper 1. As I said before, business studies is broken down into two papers, and then also in each paper they're both broken down into two subtopics. So today we'll focus on business environments and business operations. When we do business studies, I always tell my learners to put yourself in the owner's shoes. Make as if you are controlling the business. So let's just move on. We move on to the next slide. So business environments is broken down into business sectors. So what is business sectors? So we all know that in the past, since grade 8, we've learnt about business sectors. We have learnt about the primary sector, the secondary sector, and tertiary sector. So basically the primary sector we all know is our raw materials, our secondary sector is our manufacturing, and our tertiary sector is delivering a service. The next one that most matriculants always struggle with or find difficult to memorize is the impact of legislation. So once you understand the impact of legislation, it becomes so much easier. So do remember that most of the time in the business paper 1, the impact of legislation comes sometimes as an essay in. So before we move further with that, I would just like to explain further on the impact of the legislation. So we have 7 to 8 different types of legislation. We have the SDA, the LRA, EEA, BCEA, COIDA or COIDA as you may say, BBBEEA, NCA and CPA. So what does that mean? So SDA is the Skills Development Act. So the purpose of the Skills Development Act is to improve the quality of education and training in the workplace. So we all need to know the purposes of these things. The Labour Relations Act provides a framework for labor relations. So it means when we talk about labor relations, we are talking about the employee within the business. So whenever we see labor relations, we always need to look for the two keywords. We are either looking for CCMA or we are looking for collective bargaining. We move over to Employment Equity Act, still on the same slide. I'm just explaining it to you guys. The Eea Employment Equity Act, which promotes equal opportunity and fair treatment. So we're looking at diversity when we're talking about Employment Equity Act. the Basic Conditions of Employment Equity Act is the BCEA, which establishes and enforces basic conditions of employment. When we look at this, we are looking at the amount of hour, the time the employee needs to work, the leave. So this always comes in maybe in the first section of the business paper, which is the multiple choice, where we now look at, they will ask us the different types of leave. So the different types of leave that we obviously get our maternity leave, our paternity leave, and our family responsibility. The COIDA is the protection that we're looking at in the business. So once someone gets injured, this Act now comes into play. The BBBEE Act is just targeting inequality in the business. As we know, Africa as a whole is made up of a certain race, so we need to now, to make sure there is equality in the business, we now need to employ a certain amount of people of different races. The NCA, National Credit Act, is just the interest of the consumers and the lending that takes place. And the last one is the CPA, Consumer Protection Act, which is the responsive consumer behavior, as well as to be fair on both sides, especially charging the customer a certain price. We now move, or the next one we would talk about is the business strategies. But before we go there, we would now move on to the next slide. So I've just broken down what we would talk about in the business strategies. So we all know that we have our market environment, our micro environment, our market environment, and our macro environment. So our micro environment, we all know that takes place within the business. So what takes place within the business? What takes place within the business is our SWOT analysis, our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Our market environment, which is on the borderline, which we have some control. With the micro environment, remember, we have full control over the business. Our market environment, we have some control to less control over the business environment, which is our Porter's 5 forces. This is very important because it comes as a long question in for 6 to 8 marks, or it can come in as an essay question. We have our power of buyers and suppliers. So power of buyers is when we now, as a business, has a power over our suppliers. We have our competitive rivalry, threat of substitutes, and barriers to entry. We look at the macro environment. So in grade 8, we have learned that in the macro environment, we have no control. So we have no control over the environment. It means it is out of our hands, which is PESTLE. So what does PESTLE stand for? It stands for political, environment, social, technological, legal, and economic. The 2 is you can switch around if you want to, but it is the same thing. For instance, if we look at PESTLE, a good example that I'd like to use is that for the weather. So say for instance we are growing crops, but we have no control over the weather. So in summer we don't have rain. So how are we going to grow the crops? Therefore we have no control over the macro environment. There are also 4 different types of business strategies that we have to look into, which always comes in the paper. It is very important. We have integration strategy, defensive strategy, intensive strategy, and diversification strategy. So integration strategy is broken down into 3 as well. Integration strategy is your forward integration, backward integration, as well as your horizontal integration. Later on in our paper we will go over, I will then explain it further to you. The defensive strategy is also broken down into 3, which is the divestiture or disinvestment, as well as your retrenchment and liquidation. Our intensive strategy is our market penetration, market development and product development. Our last one, our diversification strategy, is our concentric strategy, a horizontal strategy and conglomerate. We now move on to the next slide, which is business operations. So we have now completed the business environments. The main three topics that we have to go over, as we said, is our business sectors, impact of legislation, as well as business strategies. So now we have business operations. We move on to the next slide. So business operations, what takes place here? Business operations is broken down into two parts, which is your TQM and your human resources. So total quality management, we'd look at the quality management, quality control, quality assurance. So the two that you need to know is quality control, which takes place before and after, and quality assurance is the inspection that takes place during and after to make sure that quality checks and quality controls take place. We also look at quality performance and quality management. With these, we'd always look at the differentiation between quality control and quality performance and quality management. We look at the quality management systems as well as the total quality management of the overall of the company. We'd also look at quality indicators as well as how quality of performance can contribute to the success or failure of each business function. The best part of the business studies that you seem to always get marks for, which is like 2 to 4 marks at times, is the PDCA. So what does that stand for? This is the abbreviation. You'd always just have to tell us what it is in the business paper. So P stands for plan, D stands for what? So P is plan, D is develop, C is and then A is action. So that's the PDCA. The TQM elements we would now go over. There are 5 TQM elements. We move over to the next slide, which is our human resource function. So we move over to the next slide again. What takes place in the human resource function? We look at the job description and job specification. So your job description, you'd always need to know the difference between the two. So job description, always think about your qualifications that you need to put down. And your job specification, you now need to look at the type of roles and duties that you need to perform. We're looking at recruitment, the selection process, placement process, induction, piecemeal and time related. You'd always see, if you go over past business papers, you'd see the piecemeal and time related. So what is piecemeal? Piecemeal is when you get paid for something for each product that you do. And the time related is when you get paid per hour. So no matter how many products you make during that amount of time, you're only going to get paid per hour. Whereas piecemeal, you will get paid per item. We'd now move over. So these are the type of verbs that comes in the business paper. So we tell you to discuss, we just mean that you have to talk about, to write about something by providing facts and supporting evidence. All of these words or verbs actually just means to explain. So when you see any of these verbs in front of a sentence, just remember that you just have to explain. Like mention, refer to something briefly without going into detail. Outline, a general description or plan showing the essential features of something but not the detail. Highlight, draw special attention to the specifics, or contrast. Contrast just means the difference as well as compare. We move down to the next slide, which is evaluate, to determine the significance or worth or conditions of, usually by carefully appraisal and study. So guys, what you need to remember is that in business there are things that is for 1 mark, which is basically just a name. If they ask you to name something, that is for 1 mark. Anything else that is for 2 marks is where you have to now explain. So identify, differentiate, those are all for 2 marks. Some are for part marks, meaning where you have to give an answer and then give a reason as well, and that's how you get your 2 marks. So now, before we move over to our paper, we'll now just recap what I've spoken about. So remember guys, in your business operations, you now focus on 2 topics only, which is your TQM, Total Quality Management, and then your HR management. So I did make a mistake before where I said the PDCA, which is your Plan, Develop, Check and Act. So that is the PDCA. Also guys, when doing business, right, I know sometimes it's quite tough to memorize everything. So in order to get you 70% in business, what you're going to do is you're going to just focus on 1 topic. So you're either going to focus on your business environment, or you're going to focus on your business operations. So when you focus on business environment, you're going to study everything, and then you're going to read over. The main thing is that you're going to read over your business operations. The same with, if you're going to choose operations, you're going to memorize all the operations and then read over business environments. The only reason for this is that the paper is on both topics, but with paper 1, where we'll go over now the multiple choice, we would now look at in the section A, multiple choice. They are both. So you will get questions on business environments, and you get questions on business operations. But in section 2, you then have to choose between business environments, business operations, and a miscellaneous question, which is a mixture of both. So if you memorize 1 topic, you will be able to do your business environments or business operations, and then as well your miscellaneous question, which means you read the other one and you're going to do the miscellaneous question and whichever topic you have chosen. And the same thing you're going to do for your essay. Because you studied operations, you do the operations essay, or if you studied business environments, you do the environments essay. So now we come to the section A, which is the compulsory question that all of you guys need to do. We look, for instance, at question 1.1. So when going into the exam room, what you guys need to do is you guys need to take a highlighter in, or a different color pen, just to underline certain key points when answering the question. So question 1.1.1, this act encourages skills training for certain designated groups of people. So firstly, we're looking at the word skills training. Because we're talking about acts, we would now look at skills training, and our mind clicks immediately to Skills Development Act. But does Skills Development Act, does it take place here? Is there any Skills Development Act in the multiple choice? No, there isn't. So now we look at another keyword, certain designated groups of people. So we would now highlight that word, certain designated groups of people. So now, as it's highlighted, we would now look at which one we're looking at. So occupational health and safety, we know that only takes place for the protection, and we're not looking at protection. Unemployment Insurance Act, we are not talking about unemployment or insurance in this one. So is it Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, or is it Labour Relations Act? So Labour Relations, we are talking about the employees in the business. But look closely. So we are actually talking about the Broad-Based Economic Empowerment Act. Why? Because we're talking about the certain designated groups of people. So it is the percentage of people that we need to employ in the business. So remember, in a business, we need to employ a certain amount of white people, colored people, and black people of all races, because we need to have diversity in the workplace. We would now move on to 1.2.2. So our Funky Fashions, who specializes in manufacturing sportswear, implemented the what integration strategy when they bought Sports Inc. clothing store. So now we know that we are looking at the integration strategy. So what do we highlight here? So we just look for a moment. We just highlight now. Firstly, we highlight the words manufacturing sportswear. So manufacturing sportswear, we now know is what? It is our supplier. And we highlight also bought Sports Inc. So Sports Inc. is a retail store that we supply, or the business supplies. So backward integration is what? Backward integration is when a company now buys over its suppliers. So it cannot be that. We know that vertical integration doesn't take place here, so that we scratch out. We already know that that isn't the answer. We look at C, horizontal integration. So what is horizontal integration? Where a company buys another company. So is that the answer? No, that isn't the answer. So our answer here would be B, forward integration. So forward integration is when the supplier buys over the retail store. For instance, the manufacturing sportswear supplier buys now over Sports Inc. Another example that we could use here to make you understand things more clearer is when we use, for instance, a fruit and veg. If we use fruit and veg is now the retail store or the store. And so what is the supplier? The farm is the supplier. So what would be the forward integration there is when the farm now buys over fruit and veg. What would be the backward integration? Just the opposite, where fruit and veg now buys over the farm. We now move on to 1.1.3, fast delivery in the what sector, as they specialize in delivery services. We know that primary sector got to do with what? It has to do with our raw materials. Secondary sector, we know, has to do with manufacturing, and tertiary sector has to do with services rendered. So as you can see, this one is simple. We just highlight delivery services. Raw materials doesn't take place here, nor does the manufacturing part take place here. So delivery services is maybe your Uber Eats or your other delivery services. So that would be your tertiary sector. So now the tertiary sector can be banks, it can be your retail stores or delivery services. So your answer there would be C. Remember guys, all matriculants in the Western Cape, I'm not sure in South Africa, has done this paper for the September preliminary exam. So this is the paper 1 that we all have did this term. We go to 1.1.4, the process of adding a new employee's skills to the requirements of a job is known as. So what is it known as? The recruitment? No, it cannot be the recruitment. Why? because with the recruitment process, we are now just taking an employee either internal or externally. Interview, we are not interviewing a person here, and we are not selecting the person at the moment. So the answer there would be placement. Why? Because placement is when the employer now gives the requirements to the employee. 1.1.5 now, John is offered a home allowance. So guys, just highlight home allowance. So we just highlighted home allowance. So what is home allowance? So home allowance, yes, it is a benefit that the company gives you. But you have to remember, we are not talking about contract benefits, we are not talking about compulsory benefits, nor marketing benefits. When we talk about benefits, your mind has to always click to fringe benefits. So highlight the word fringe benefits if you have it at home. Fringe benefits is very important. Why? Because it always comes in the paper. It either comes as a multiple choice question or it comes in section B, where you now need to name 2 to 3 fringe benefits. So the fringe benefits that we are talking about that always occurs is your home allowance, your pension benefits, your UIF. Sometimes you get a car allowance as well as your home allowance. So guys, that is your question 1. We move on to question 1.2 now. This is the section where you now need to choose the correct word for the sentence that follows. So remember, with section 1, basically what they're trying to do is they give you 2 answers that are incorrect, and they give you 2 answers where the one is correct and the one looks very similar. So we now look at 1.2.1. This act forces businesses to disclose more information about their products and processes. So the keywords we are looking at is disclose more information about their products and processes. We highlight that. Okay, it's highlighted now. So what we're looking at is the acts, because they're asking us the act. So what act takes place, what act is given to us? So the Consumer Protection Act is given to us and the National Credit Act. So if we look at the National Credit Act, the National Credit Act is not needed here. Why? We are not looking at credit purposes, or we're not looking at lending money. We are looking at the products and processes. So the Consumer Protection Act, we're looking at the businesses, so that the business doesn't exploit us, where they now charge, for example, a packet of knickknacks R5. We can now take this up in the legal way, and we can now sue the company for that. So the answer there is Consumer Protection Act. 1.2.2, Metro Consultants implements SWOT analysis to investigate reasons for poor management in the business. We'll look at this closely. So we now know that this takes place within the business. So if it takes place within the business, we know it's a micro environment. We look at what is given to us. So they're telling us, so they're giving us SWOT analysis. Now we know that SWOT analysis does take place within business. They're giving us SWOT, they're ending off with analysis. So the answer there is SWOT analysis. 2 marks for that. 1.2.3, Susan celebrates her birthday in December and turns 65. The reason for ending a contract is what? They're giving us 2 options, either retirement or retrenchment. So guys, you need to know that retrenchment is when the business now fires. They don't actually fire you, but they let you go because they don't have any work for you, or they don't have enough money to pay you. So the answer there would be retirement, because at the age of 65, you're at a good age now, and this is when you actually retire and pick up your package, your retirement package, if you're working long for a company. So the answer there is retirement. 1.2.4, ensuring that products are made possible at the lowest cost is the responsibility of the what function. So what functions are there given to us? They are only given one function. They are given two functions. They are given the financial function and they are given the production function. So we know that the financial function doesn't take place here. So immediately we go for the answer, production function. Remember, this falls part of the 8 business functions that you've learnt since grade 8. The last one here is 1.2.5. Joseph Contracts only uses agencies to advertise vacancies, and that is why it is what recruitment? Is it a placement? No, it's not. Or is it external? So we're looking at placement. This is basically where the employer now tells or gives the requirements to the employee. So that is not the answer. External recruitment is the answer. Why is that the answer? Because John Contracts uses agencies. So they use agencies to advertise the vacancies, meaning they are looking for people outside of the business, to employ people from outside of the business. If it was internal recruitment, John Contracts would now employ someone within the business and give them a better position within the business. So that's your answers for 1.1 and 1.2. We move on to the last section of the day that we would focus on, which is 1.3. So remember, guys, Section A is a total of 30 marks. This is quite easy if you just break the words up when answering the questions. It is not that difficult, and as I said before, just focus on one topic and then study and then read the other topic. It will really help if you are struggling with business. But if you are not struggling with business studies, because it's not that difficult, what you need to do is you just need to read over everything, understand the different words, and then you'd have it. Study everything and I'm sure you'd get full marks. So the last section we'd focus on now is question 1.3. We are now choosing the correct meaning for the word in column A. So match column A with column B. So column A, the word is concentric diversification. We're looking for what goes with concentric diversification. So if we look at concentric diversification, remember, as I said before, they would always give you 2 answers and you need to choose the correct one. So here we're looking at letter C and letter F. So concentric diversification, when businesses add a new product that is related to existing products which will appeal to new customers. Or is it when a business add new products that are unrelated to existing products which may appeal to new customers? So the keywords there that we are looking at is unrelated to related. So when we come to concentric, we need to know that it is related to existing products. So therefore the answer would be C. This diversification, also there are the other 2 are horizontal and conglomerate. We move over now to 1.3.2, National Skills Development Strategy. So basically we just break up the word national skills. We're looking at the keywords training or some skill development that takes place. So the answers that we are basically looking for, the 2 answers that looks quite similar that we'd go for is D and I. So improves access to training programs or improve the supply of skills. So improving the supply of skills, yes, but we're not looking for that. We are looking for the answer D, improves access to training programs, because it's the development strategy that we use for skills. This also forms part of the SDA, as well as when we look at CETA, but we'd go over that in our next session. So quality, we're looking for the answer for quality. The answer would be G. 1.3.4, monitoring and evaluation of quality process. This takes place in the TQM, and that answer is E. The last one would be human resource function, would be B. So those are the answers for section A for the paper that you guys have written for your preliminary exams. You just have to go over everything. We'll catch up in session 2 again. I'd like to thank you very much for your participation as well as for listening. I hope you enjoyed the session, and we'll catch up again. Thank you very much. Shukran.
Shukran so much to our guest in studio, Ibrahim Majid, who is tutoring everyone in business studies. And of course, we were looking at paper 1 today. I just want to say also that if you would like to catch up, if you missed part of this broadcast, you can check it out on YouTube and Facebook. Imran, if people want to get hold of you, is there an email or contact number that people can
yes, there is a contact number that you can contact me on 061 359 4637. I'll just repeat that, 061 359 4637, as well as my email address, Imran, IMRAAN 218 246870 @gmail.com.
Shukran so much once again for joining us. All the best, and we look forward to next week, inshallah.
Shukran.
Well, that's it for our broadcast, for our matric revision program, and you're welcome to, as I mentioned, go back and check it out on Facebook as well as YouTube. From myself, Muhammad Fasih Peterson, until I speak again, inshallah, I bid you wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and have a safe day further. And of course, stay tuned to the Voice of the Cape, 91.3 FM.
The Voice of the Cape, 91.3 FM stereo.
More for less.